Hi, everybody. Today I'm starting a two-part series about being a narcissist magnet. I was a narcissist magnet for a long time. My mom programmed me to be that way. People like us, especially scapegoat children who were raised by narcissists, it's just so normalized to us that we miss the signs, we miss the red flags. And narcissists, they pick up on that and they prey on us. So that's what I mean by being a narcissist magnet. I have dated and befriended many narcissists throughout my life. But I refuse to be a narcissist magnet now. And to make sure I don't let it happen again, I had to learn a lot and grow as a person. I had to know the signs and be willing to walk away. So today I'm going to talk about a relationship that I had with someone named Michael. And we dated actually quite a long time ago. But as I learned that my mother was a narcissist and learned the signs, and then I started to learn about the signs in romantic relationships, I realized, oh my gosh, he was probably a narcissist. It's really the only thing that makes sense. So I'm going to be sharing some signs to look for if you're dating, because if you're like me, you're very vulnerable to falling into a relationship with a narcissist where you're being manipulated and controlled and you don't even know it. However, knowing the signs and being willing to walk away can empower you to either get out of a relationship with a narcissist if you're currently in one, or to avoid starting one in the first place. Next week, we're going to focus more on friendships, but today I just want to talk about romantic relationships, signs and red flags to be looking for, many that can show up right on the very first date, to just keep you from traveling that road in the first place. Now, being that I'm female and I date men, I'm going to be referring to dates as he or him, but know that this applies to other genders too, though it might play out a little bit differently in women. So number one, the focus is on himself in conversation. This is tricky because a narcissist will know how to make you feel like he's so interested in you and wants to be with you. And because we long for that so deeply, it can be easy to miss that he's basically just talking about himself. When I met Michael, everything was about him, his politics, his experiences, what he thought on things. But he'd say it in a way that it was like he was seeing if I agreed, so it wasn't so obvious that he was basically talking about himself. Like he'd say, well, I think such and such, or I love this, I love that, and then he would just look at me like he was waiting for me to say I like it too, or just to see what my reaction would be. And that was just enough to make me think he had interest in me as a person. But there were never really any conversations where I could freely talk about myself and my experiences with him showing any interest. He was the director of the conversations, always. With a narcissist, the interest is in himself and how you can fit into his world. He doesn't care about your world or being any part of your world. Kind of branching from that is number two, and that's that he will ask questions about you, about some things, but on issues that are kind of weird to be asking somebody early on in a relationship. They want to know right away what makes you tick. They want to know your sensitivities. They want to know your vulnerabilities. They're interested in information about you that gives them the ability to control you. So they might ask a lot of questions about your childhood, for example, and they're looking for issues with your mom or your dad, stuff that they can exploit later on to manipulate you. And it's normal early on in a relationship to ask some questions about someone's childhood, of course. But the types of questions a narcissist will ask are kind of personal and just, like I said, getting at some of those things that would be, you'd be really sensitive about, or just something that would really hurt. So if you see that they're getting into kind of personal stuff early on, that's definitely a red flag, and maybe you need to be very cautious. He'll have a high expectation of others. Like if you're at a restaurant, the seating will need to be just so, or he'll complain. If the waiter or waitress isn't doing things exactly to his liking, you're going to see signs of irritation. There's little flexibility or grace with these people, and if your mother's a narcissist, you'll know that. It's just that it plays out differently in these relationships where we don't always pick up on it unless we're looking for it, Know that if you see somebody behaving that way, if you pursue a relationship with someone who is like that, he's going to treat you in the same way. He's going to want you to be perfect at all times, and when you aren't, get ready for the rage. Michael was an extremely irritable person, and all of my time with him was spent trying to keep him happy, trying to make sure nothing went wrong, because if it did, he'd be in a bad mood for hours, and I didn't want that. So I felt like I had to make sure that he was happy and that everything just went very, very smoothly. Like, I would make sure we took a route with no traffic if I could, if we were going somewhere, or I'd be careful how I said things. I'd never give an opinion that differed from his. In my mind, I was just being a good girlfriend and creating a good experience for him. I was so manipulated by him, it's like he'd taken over my mind in a way. I really felt like it was my obligation to him to make sure everything was just so he could be happy, but he never, ever offered the same consideration to me. His flaws, they didn't matter, and it was my job to be patient with him, but he didn't have to be patient with me in return. And if I didn't care for something like food or an activity, and he did like it, he talked to me like I was an idiot. So I'd often pretend I enjoyed things that I actually didn't because I just wanted to avoid the conflict. I was not allowed to have my own preferences or opinions, and really I wasn't allowed to have that in my childhood either. So it's like, again, looking back on it, I'm like, how could I have not seen these things? But I recognize, like, that was just so normalized of an experience. These were all things that I had to learn to survive in my childhood because I was being abused. And the problem is, what was once a survival tactic now got carried over into my relationships outside the home and just invited all kinds of terrible people into my life, and I ended up being even further abused. Everything we did when I was dating Michael was ultimately about him. Just like narcissistic mothers, narcissist boyfriends or girlfriends will love bomb. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine with what I just described, it became unbearable at times, and so sometimes I would speak up for myself, and that would very quickly erupt into an explosive argument. He'd gaslight me and blame me and just become so enraged. Of course, I was always the problem during these confrontations, never him. But then he sure knew how to get me back into the position he wanted me in. Like, once after we had an argument like that, I went and laid in bed. I was just so upset and so overwhelmed. I couldn't understand why he just wouldn't hear me out. Remember that I didn't know my mother was a narcissist at that time. I didn't know I'd been programmed to behave this way in relationships. I didn't know that narcissism was something that was normalized to me. My mom kind of trained me as a child to develop these habits, but to me, it was just how life was. And it didn't really occur to me at any point that things should be different. And so I just laid there upset and wondering why he was being this way and what I could do to get it to stop. And a little later, he came in and laid down next to me, and he rubbed my back and started to sing his high praises of me. "You're just too good for me. You do all this work to help those kids at your job. You do so many things for good people. You're above me, and I'm so lucky to have you." And I forgot all about what had happened, and I moved right back into the position of being exactly who and what he wanted me to be. And this cycle happened over and over. Looking back on it, at the beginning of our relationship, even though he talked about himself a lot, he did make me feel like he really, really wanted to be with me, like I was this special person he'd been looking for his whole life. And even though he talked about himself a lot, he did it in a way that made it feel like he liked me so much he just wanted to open those doors and share himself with me. And he wanted the relationship to move along very quickly. And I let it because he really convinced me that I was this amazing person to him, like someone he'd looked for his whole life. So, of course, he'd want to get things very serious very fast. Narcissists are not okay with taking things slowly in a new relationship. They don't have the patience for that. It doesn't fulfill their needs, and everything is about fulfilling their needs. You're there to serve their needs, and they're not going to wait around for you to do that. So if you meet someone and they're speaking so highly of you at the start, like excessively high, over the top, be very suspicious and be very slow to get physically involved or to spend a lot of time together. And if he's really pushing for that, remind yourself that normal people don't act that way. When they just meet somebody, they take the time to really get to know each other and see if they're a good fit. And only then do they start a more serious relationship. If you're on date 1 or 2, and he's making you feel like you're his queen, and oh, let's just get on with it, I just want a serious relationship with you, and he wants to dive in physically and in every way, I would stop right then and there, because that's not a normal person. And number 5 is kind of related to the last one, and that's that they make false promises about the future. And they make those promises very early in the relationship. And I'm talking like exotic vacations, marriage, living together, all the beautiful children you're going to have together. They'll express so much excitement about your future together. You know, like whatever it is that appeals to you, that's what he's going to promise. And even though he speaks of these things like he just can't wait for them to happen, they never actually will happen. They're just a manipulation. He finds what it is that you're looking for and then promises you that. And again, like we want those things so badly because we didn't get them from our own family. We're looking for those things and they know it. They pick up on that. And so they make all these promises that make us feel like our dreams are going to come true with this person when it's nothing more than a fantasy and a tool to control and manipulate us. Michael would speak about the day we got married and lived together really early in our relationship, and oh, it was going to be so wonderful. Well, after more than a year had passed, no ring had showed up, and I waited and waited, and I kept waiting, and I thought maybe he's too scared to propose. Maybe he doesn't know I'd say yes. And so finally I brought it up and said, you know, I really want to get married. I want to have a family. I said we'd been together a long time, so like, what are we waiting for? And unbeknownst to me, right after that, he immediately began looking for someone else. And as soon as he did, he left me. They will see what you're looking for and then promise it, but the promises will never be fulfilled. And you know, a little joke or two early in a relationship about marriage or big vacations or whatever, like things like that couples do in a long-term and serious relationship. Kind of a little joke or a little comment isn't that abnormal. But talking about them in depth, like he's just sure they're going to happen and he can't wait to do these things with you, that's just not normal. And that's a sign that you're being manipulated. They can be very charming and helpful to others, especially when things are going their way and they're getting attention. So like think while they might be impatient with a waiter who's busy with other tables or not giving him everything he wants, if patrons of the place or staff are giving him attention the way he wants, he will seem so sociable and charming, like excessively so. But deep down, it's still all about him. It's totally superficial. Michael used to brag a lot about things he did for other people. He was a volunteer with the American Legion, so he'd often go to funerals of veterans to represent the American Legion there. And afterward, he would just brag about how everyone was looking at him and in awe at what a great job he did. He did a lot of volunteer work, especially with veterans, and I loved being with him during those times because he was so cheerful and just smiling. He was so fun to be with. That was the man I wished I could see all the time, but really only did in those settings. Normally, he was just this grumpy person I was always trying to keep appeased in basically every setting we were in except that. But when he's out there volunteering and everybody thinks he's just doing so great, it's like he just lit up, almost like he was mildly high or something. He was just so excited and happy. And then afterwards, he'd brag about it for a while, and then he would just return to that grumpy person again. And I would listen to him go on and on about what everyone thought of what he did. I mean, like once he went to a funeral and he walked up to the casket and he saluted the veteran that had passed away and was in this casket. And so he comes and tells me, and he goes, yeah, they all looked at me and were like, wow, that was really great. It's this weird form of being charming, but it's for the purpose of getting as much attention on themselves as possible. So it's still ultimately about him. For a long time, I really thought he was just a really kind man who liked doing things for others, and he just felt so good about that he shared it with me. But I can see now, it's not normal to brag about doing something nice for someone. That's like really poor etiquette. And if you really are helping somebody just for the joy of seeing them be helped, then you aren't going to feel the need to go and shout that to the world and announce what you've done. The joy of the act is enough. So if you meet someone and he seems just over the top friendly and charming with everyone around him, be suspicious, because most people aren't like that. And kind of related to that is how much they want appreciation and credit for everything that they do. So if you go out on a date and he points out the bill that he's paying and how much he's spent on you, definitely be on the alert. Michael would take me to dinner or buy me things at times, but boy, I'd better express absolute adoration to him, or he'd get really angry. And it's like, again, it's just poor etiquette to point out how much a bill costs when you take someone to dinner or you get them a gift, but they're just oblivious to this. Another sign is that they talk very badly about their exes. And Michael was terrible about this. He talked so badly about his ex-wife and his other ex-girlfriends. Oh, they were just idiots. They were such a nightmare. They were so annoying, and thank goodness he finally found me. And of course, I was too naive at the time to consider that he talked this way upon meeting every one of those women for the first time. And when he cheated on me and left, I'm sure he was talking about me to his new interest in these ways. And a couple years later, he left her, and I'm sure he was talking about her to some new woman that he met, about what a nightmare she was, what I was, and all these women. If I went out on a date with somebody, I would not spend a lot of time talking about my experiences with Michael, because I would be wanting to know about the person that I'm on the date with, to see if this is something I want to move forward with, or if I want to continue to get to know him. It would be really odd to be sitting there talking about this bad experience I had years ago with this dating relationship. It would probably come up at some point, but probably not until much, much deeper in the relationship, when it was very serious and had been long established as serious, and then maybe I would bring up that I was hurt in this way. But even then, I wouldn't be saying, oh, he was an idiot, he was so annoying, I'm so glad I found you. It would be more in the context of what led me, kind of what I'm saying here, why I ended up in that relationship and what I did to make sure it didn't happen to me again. So if you meet someone and they're just talking so badly about their exes really early on, that really is a red flag. And just know that it's probably only a matter of time before he's with someone else and talking about you in the exact same way. They'll try to make you jealous. They like the sense of control and power over you that this gives them. So he'll comment on the bodies of other women or things like that. He wants to see your reaction. And he wants to make sure that you feel inferior and like he could run off with someone else if you're not careful. If a man does this and watches you to see what you'll do, leave him. You deserve more respect and consideration than this. If you're out with a man and he's commenting on another woman's body or comparing your body to someone else's, get out of the car, get out of wherever you are, and go home without him. You absolutely deserve more respect and better treatment than that. They demand your attention and empathy, even though they give very little of that, if any, themselves. Michael was just so often pretending like he was hurt or in pain or that something was wrong that he needed my sympathy for. Like once, he was adamant that his knee was badly injured in a work accident one day. I mean, all he did was slip while he was cleaning a car. And he wanted so much sympathy from me, and it went on and on. He said he was going to need surgery, and it was so terrible. And at first, I did show him a lot of sympathy. I really helped him. He was limping around. Finally, at my urging, he went to a doctor, and the doctor found absolutely nothing wrong with his knee at all. And he was livid that the doctor would not do surgery on his knee to fix it. He just kept saying, I need surgery. I need surgery. I can't believe they won't fix it. But there was nothing wrong. And this went on for months. I did see him walking normally, kind of in my peripheral vision, and then when he saw I was looking at him, he would start limping. Or like he'd stand up from the couch and then just sit right back down and whine about the pain in his knee. It was constant. And I got so tired of it, I just started ignoring him. And that made him really over the top angry. He just absolutely demanded my sympathy and attention. And somehow, I still felt this compulsion to help him, like to save him. I could tell he had really poor self-esteem, and I just wanted to build that up. But unfortunately, that was an impossible task, no matter how hard I tried. But that's why, even with all that going on, I just kept trying. I kind of felt like it was my place to help him feel better about himself. And if he could just do that and feel loved, then a lot of this would get better. But it was actually just a manipulation and a way to get attention. A narcissist does not like seeing you succeed. And yeah, they'll support you in a way, but not really. When I got a raise at work, Michael just shrugged it off. And when I would talk about something I'd accomplished at work or in my education that I was really proud of, he just tuned me out, or he'd even sigh. The attention was to be on him, always. And so my accomplishments were always secondary. It's like on the one hand, they'll love bomb you when it suits their interests. Like remember when he flattered me so much about the kids that I worked with at work? I worked at a mental health facility for children with very severe behavior disorders who were getting long-term inpatient treatment. And yeah, when I was upset at him and we'd had this argument that I walked away from, well, now suddenly he's flattering me in this work that I'm doing. But then when I would come excited to tell him some accomplishment at work or reaching a goal or getting a raise or a promotion, he didn't care. So they can flatter you and compliment you, and so you can think or be deceived into believing that they do admire you. But then when you're rewarded for something you do or honored in some way, they don't have any interest because that doesn't serve their interest. They'll love bomb you when it serves their needs. But when it doesn't, and it's taking attention away from them and onto you, they don't want anything to do with that. Lastly, they gaslight you in every way. Everything that ever goes wrong in the relationship is blamed on you. Always. No matter how clear it is that it's his fault, you will ultimately be the source of the problem. Just like it was with your narcissistic mother or your narcissistic parent. If you confront him about something he did to you, well, he did this terrible thing to you because you did such and such. He's impatient because you're demanding or annoying or too sensitive. Oh, you're getting upset and you're crying, you always cry. Well, he won't do this because you won't do that. You're always the source of the problems in the relationship. They'll never show any desire to improve upon themselves, to save your relationship, or to make you happy. It's always on you to change to make him happy. Every time I tried to talk to Michael about something he was doing that I wanted him to work on, he talked to me like I was stupid or crazy or ridiculous or sensitive or whatever. And then the conversation would very quickly shift to what I needed to do to make him happy. Everything was always blamed on me. And after spending years being treated like that by my mother, I was just so used to that treatment, like I said. I went along with it. So how did the relationship end? I kind of alluded to it before, but did I leave? Did I see there was a problem? Absolutely not. And I would have married this man had he asked me. But instead, that's not where it went, and there was no hope of it ever going that way. I mentioned I wanted to get married. I was calling him out on stuff that bothered me more often. And so behind my back, he started looking for somebody else. And when he secured a relationship with someone else, he just very suddenly and abruptly broke up with me without warning. He claims he was giving me all these signs that he was no longer interested in me. But the truth is, he treated me so badly all the time. I didn't even notice whatever signs he was trying to send my way. I mean, if he even was. Maybe he just said that. The way he broke up with me was horrific. We had discussed marriage. He said he'd think about it. And then later he messaged me and said he was going to bring me a gift and to be sure I'm dressed up nicely for it. He definitely made it sound like he was going to give me an engagement ring and propose. And I was so happy that he was ready to commit and ready to settle down and things were going to get so much better. That's just totally what I deceived myself into believing, because that's what I wanted. He showed up at my house by surprise with a gift bag. And inside that gift bag was all of my belongings that I'd had at his house. He said he wanted to see the look on my face when I opened it and realized it was just my own things inside. Like, he purposely, to break up with me, decided to set me up to think that he was about to propose to me, and then showed up with my things from his house. He never showed any regret or remorse for what he did. He didn't care at all. And that took years to recover from after being treated that way. It wasn't so much the end of the relationship. It was the extreme lack of care and consideration for my feelings that he showed during the breakup and afterward. It really was traumatic for me. But there's really no other way that relationship could have ended but me being purposely hurt by him and him walking away not caring one bit. I'm pretty sure he's a narcissist. That's all he's capable of doing and being. And all the signs were there all along, from the very first date. I just wasn't able to see them. So when we meet someone, people like us who have been raised by narcissists, whether this person be a friend or a possible romantic interest, watch for these signs. Keep your wits about you. Keep your distance for a while. Really, one way to just test it out if they're a narcissist is to take the relationship slowly, because he won't stay. He wants somebody that's going to go hard, fast, and heavy right away because he needs those needs met immediately. And if you're not meeting them and he's expected to take time to get to know you and actually get to know you, he will leave. So really, that's just an easy way right there to weed them out. Take it very slow. Don't get physical with him. Don't let him talk all about himself. Take the time, because a narcissist won't take the time. And that's a great way to weed them out. Just always keep in mind that we are so vulnerable to befriending or dating narcissists, because red flags that would make other people uncomfortable, they don't make us uncomfortable because it's just so normal for us. So be aware of all of these signs. But also look for positive signs. Does this person show interest in you in a balanced way? In other words, like he shares about himself, but also asks lots of questions about yourself too. Does he answer your questions openly without immediately dominating the conversation from there on out? Does he treat others with respect? Not the over-the-top charming person that a narcissist will be, but just a basic level of respect. Does he light up and smile ear to ear when he's being given attention? That's not normal either. And does he take the time to really get to know you before wanting to advance the relationship? Think about not just how you don't want to be treated, which is important, but also think about how you do want to be treated. And look for those signs too. Because even if someone isn't a narcissist, they may not provide you with what you want from a relationship. And if they don't, just move on. There will be somebody out there that is right for you. But all of this starts with a love of and respect for your own self. And that's something that we scapegoat children really struggle with. But healing can come. Healing is within reach. Learn to love yourself and respect yourself. In fact, I would say Don't date at all until you take some time to learn to love yourself and respect yourself, because you need that foundation first. Otherwise, we're just too much at risk for falling into an abusive relationship with a narcissist or someone else with severe mental disorders. We're just too vulnerable and at risk for that. And you have to love yourself first before it's really safe to try these relationships. Once you've learned to do that, when you really love yourself, when you respect yourself, then you expect other people to treat you in that same way. You expect them to treat you with love and respect. And then when they don't, you'll notice and you'll walk away. When you learn to love and respect yourself, the doors open to people who are mostly healthy, to relationships that are healthy, and you don't have to worry anymore about having all these people in your life who are controlling and manipulating you. You deserve to be around people who appreciate you for who you are, who celebrate, like genuinely celebrate your triumphs, and who are happy when you succeed. You deserve a relationship that's balanced and not one-sided. You deserve relationships where both members benefit equally, not just the person you're in the relationship with. And the start to finding that is realizing and accepting that you deserve that, because you do. It's a shame that we didn't get that from our mothers. We've had to adapt to a life without that, something just so important that's so necessary for proper development to happen. We've had to adapt and get by without it. And so we can be very tolerant of the same treatment from other people, and it's time to put that to an end. We've experienced enough abuse and trauma from our narcissistic mothers. We don't need anyone else in our lives adding to the pile. And no one is worth enduring that level of toxicity in our lives. If you're listening to this and it's becoming clear that you're in a relationship with someone who is likely a narcissist, leave. Show yourself one of the greatest forms of love and leave, because you absolutely deserve better. If you're living with this person and you don't have anywhere to go, seek out a domestic violence shelter. Not all forms of domestic violence are physical. So if you're afraid that, well, I'm not really being abused because he's not hitting me, I mean, maybe he is, but even if he's not, a domestic violence center will still take you if you're experiencing emotional and mental violence. At least most shelters will. Of course, I can't speak for all of them. There's a really great miniseries. I think it's called The Maid. I'll find it and I'll link it in the description below. But that was this lady's situation. She was not being physically abused by her husband, but she was being controlled and manipulated through all these fear tactics and things that he was doing. And she finally decided to leave. And she had a young daughter. This is all based on a true story. And she went to a domestic violence shelter, afraid that she wouldn't qualify for the help because he wasn't physically abusing her. And they taught her that there are multiple forms of domestic violence and multiple forms of abuse. If a person is creating a situation where you are fearful to leave, but you're also fearful to say or do certain things because of what they'll do, you are being controlled and manipulated, and you need to leave. Find somewhere to go. Get on the internet, find a homeless shelter, a domestic violence shelter, call a friend, find somewhere to go, if you're living with the person, of course, and leave. Because you deserve better. You deserve to be treated with love and respect. I know it's so much easier said than done. Narcissists look for people like us. They prey on us. They want people like us who are very vulnerable to their brainwashing and programming, and we can really feel extremely bonded to these people because they've made it that way. So the thought of leaving can seem like a horrific choice, like you're just having your heart ripped out. But it's the right choice. Save your bonding and attachment for someone who actually loves you and respects you, rather than with somebody who you have to constantly convince yourself that he loves and respects you. I really hope the information in this episode will help you protect yourself from any future abuse from a narcissist. Everybody deserves to never be abused, but if you're listening to this channel, you probably already have been. And you deserve a life from this day forward absolutely free from abuse. Next week, we're going to talk about friendships and how to make sure that the friends in our lives are mostly healthy people who are capable of healthy relationships, and how we can engage in healthy relationships ourselves. I'll see you next week. And please remember, to all my fellow survivors out there, you are worthy, you are valuable, and you are beautiful, whether your mom sees that or not.